All right, so yesterday we did our first lesson. We talked about just what is a function, domain, range, stuff like that. And for the next lesson, we're going to actually do some operations, do some math with functions. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions. So we'll start with this. This should be Algebra 1-2 review, where I'm just talking about what it means when we write an equation in this notation, which is called function notation, where it's w of n or f of x or g of x or whatever it is. So we have this function notation, and then it says find w of 1. That's how we say that. Now all that means is to take 1. So instead of calling it w of n, we're calling it w of 1. We're basically taking a 1, putting it in for n. And all that's saying is plug 1 in for n here. If we're going to replace the label, this is kind of like the label for the function. But instead of it being generically called n, we're going to call it a 1. Then that means we're plugging a 1 in right here. So here we go. Something like this. W of 1 equals, and then we just do it, 5 to the 1 minus 1 minus 3, which equals 5 to the 0 minus 3. And then I picked this one specifically. I wanted to remind you as soon as possible that anything to the power of 0 always equals 1. So we'll just write that over to the side here. Anything to the power of 0 always equals 1. Doesn't matter what it is. So this is 1 minus 3, and of course if you have 1 positive, which we have right here, and we have 3 negatives, when they fight each other, the negatives win by 2. So the answer to this problem is negative 2. That's it. Review. The notation w of 1 does not mean to times w times 1 or anything like that. It's just a way of saying, it's a quick way of saying plug a 1 in to this hunk of stuff right here. Here's another one pretty similar. We are now we're going to plug a negative 7 into the function right here. So make sure you're writing this out nice. You're labeling it. It's k of negative 7 equals, and then we just start putting the numbers in. Now be careful. We already have a negative. That's this one. Right? But I'm also now plugging in where this x is. I'm going to plug in a negative 7. So that's going to be a parenthesis negative 7. And then we have minus 2. And then absolute value. Get that straight right there. This is a minus for that. And then x turned in, instead of x, now it's negative 7. So we're putting a negative 7 in for where the x was. Okay. So that, now we just do math. Now it's absolute value. This is positive 7 minus 2, and the absolute value of 5. And absolute value just means no matter what's inside of the absolute value, it turns positive. If it's already positive, it stays positive. But we finished the problem. We put just 5. We don't leave the absolute value symbols in there. If that had been a negative 5 inside there, then we would have still had a 5 right here. All right, one more where we're basically just plugging things in, only I changed it up a little bit. Now we have this k of n equals this, and instead of saying find, instead of there being an actual number here, which we would then put that number in for n, we're going to replace n with whatever this is. In this case, this hunk of stuff called a plus 3. So it's going to be k of a plus 3 equals a plus 3 minus 2. That's me just taking a plus 3, plugging it in where the n was. No more n, it's replaced by the new thing, a plus 3. And then you always just do whatever you can. In this case we have, it's just going to be a plus 1. Because you have your a was just a, and then 3 minus 2 is 1. You'd never leave that like that if you can put a 1. All right, now we're changing gears a little bit. So there, this assignment has a lot of different things on it. I wanted to cover as many of them as I could for you. We're changing now to where we have two functions, and we're going to do some operation with those functions. So they give you the functions. Here's one, here's the other, and they want us in this case to subtract f of t minus g of t. We're not plugging any numbers in. We're not even changing we're just leaving it all as t, f of t, g of t. But we are going to subtract these two hunks of stuff. So that's going to look like this. It's going to be 2t plus 1 minus, and then we got to be careful. We could put a parenthesis here, but it really isn't doing anything other than saying, hey, look, I have this function that was right here. But this other one, we have to put a parenthesis. I'll explain. What this problem is saying is it's this whole function right here minus, because of the minus here, this whole function. Now minus signs distribute into a function, so that's why we need this parenthesis right here, because if we didn't do that we'd only have negative negative to make plus here, but actually that's going to be minus over here too. So this is nothing. This is just still 2t plus 1, but then we have plus 2t, and then we have plus 4. Negative distributes to this to become positive 2t, and then the negative times negative here distributes plus 4. And the final answer is 4t plus 5. Right, we got 2t plus 2t is 4t, 1 plus 4 is 5. All right, here's another one, just mixing it up on you a little bit, try to give you a little bit of everything. This is two functions again, but this time it's dividing the functions, so this function divided by this function, but we're also putting a negative 3 into each of the ends instead of it being just generically n like the last one. So you can do this a couple ways. Really all this is take negative 3, plug it into here, plug it into here, you'll get two answers. You'll get two regular old numbers, and then the answer to the whole problem is the first number divided by the second number, whatever goes here. So let me do it a couple different ways. Let me show you. So g of negative 3 equals 3 times negative 3 plus 4, which is negative 5. Right? This is negative 9 plus 4, which is negative 5. And then the other one is h of negative 3 equals 4 times negative 3 minus 2. I'm just plugging negative 3 in right here, right there. And that one is negative 12 minus 2, which is negative 14. Right, this is negative 12, positive times a negative is negative, and then you got more negatives, so 12 negatives, 2 negatives, 14 negatives. And then finally, since the problem said we want g over h of that number, that means we take that number, plug it into the two functions, get the two numbers, and then we're just dividing those numbers. So the final answer, g of h of negative 3 equals negative 5 over negative 14, but we would never, when we divide and we have two negatives, the answer is positive. So that's the answer to that problem. And I said earlier, there's, I could show you a couple ways, but really that's it. I mean, you're going to take the numbers, you're taking this number, plugging it in, dividing. All I was going to say is you could write it out as basically this function divided by this function, and then plug the negative 3 into the whole thing. There's nothing different. That's basically what I'm doing here. I have the numerator and the denominator. So that's it. One more. So this is multiplying two functions, but once again, since it's just a number here, all we really need to do is plug in negative 2 into this function f, then plug negative 2 into this function g, and then whatever the two answers are, multiply them together. So f of negative 2 is negative 2 squared plus 5 times negative 2, which is positive 4 minus 10, which is negative 6. So that's f of negative 2. Then g of negative 2 is 2 times negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 3. So f times g of negative 2 equals negative 6 times negative 3, which is positive 18. Many of the problems I did for you are directly off the homework. A couple of them I changed around a little bit. You can figure out which ones are which, but that should definitely get you started. That hits a little bit of everything throughout the assignment. If this is going too fast for you, of course you can always pause it, rewind it, rewatch, do what you need to do, but this should get you going pretty good. So work hard, be nice, see you soon.